This is Tom Brady with Vintage American Realty, and today we are going to do a New York State disclosure form for buyer and seller. So we're going to go to resources over here. We're going to open resources. We're going to go to Instanet. Going to wait for that to open. Now we're going to go to forms. Going to go to One Key MLS. We're going to go to agency disclosure for buyer and seller. Okay, now I'm going to try not to get into the weeds on this. It shouldn't be complicated, but it can become complicated. You should be giving this to a buyer or seller at the first substantive contact. Okay, now you need to understand with this the difference between clients and customers. Okay, so now if you have a listing, you print your name, print the name of the company, check off seller, seller's agent. Okay, now if you're taking the listing, you can get advance consent for dual agency. Okay, so advance consent for dual agency would be that you're acting on a buyer client and a seller client, so you'd have to definitely inform both of them about that. Okay, and you would only have dual agency when you have two clients. So if you have a seller client and a buyer customer, you don't have dual agency. So if you're doing an open house and a buyer wants to come buy the house, the seller is the seller's agent, and the buyer, you're also the seller's agent. Okay, so he would be a customer, the buyer, wouldn't be dual agency. If he, demanded representation, then you would have dual agency. There's two ways you can go with it. One is that you represent both parties. That's kind of difficult, and you could get into some legal trouble there. So most people prefer to do advanced informed consent dual agency with designated sales agents. Now keep in mind, the designated agent will be another agent in your office. It cannot be the broker or office manager. Other than that, would be another agent. You would represent the seller. They would be appointed to represent the buyer. Okay, so you get the advance consent from sellers so that you can bring, if you have a buyer client, you can show them the listing. Okay, so the seller will be agreeing to let your buyer clients, not buyer customers, buyer clients see the listing. Okay, now in the case of a buyer, you would also check the dual agent or dual agent with designated sales agent advance consent, because that way you can show your broker's listings to your buyer client. Okay, because the seller is a client of your broker, so then you would have dual agency if you have a buyer client. Okay, so it gets a little sticky. Again, with the buyer client, you'd probably be better off going with designated sales agents. Can't be your broker, can't be your office manager, be another person in there. If the buyer's your client, then the listing agent would be representing the seller. Okay, so just let's get back on the simple way of doing it. You have a buyer, you're going to be a buyer's agent. Put your name of the company, check buyer, buyer's agent. You can skip the dual agency unless you're going to show your own listings or your company's listings. Okay, then you go down signature of buyer and date. Okay, now you can always get the dual agency later on. Okay, but say you did get the dual agency, say you have a listing, you have the dual agency signed advance. Say, let's say we did one, let's say we did advance informed consent. Okay, and you put your name representing the seller, another person representing the buyer. What you should also do is have the seller initial this disclosure and put the date that you informed them again of the dual agency, because dual agency can represent or present problems legally. Okay, so basically, I hope I didn't confuse you. You're going to give this to every person you have substantive contact with, along with the fair housing disclosure. Okay, now if you have a buyer, you're a buyer's agent, you can check buyer, buyer's agent. If you're a broker's agent, you would check that one. Okay, if you have a listing, seller, seller as seller's agent. Okay, and we went into the dual agency, but basically you'll mainly be dealing with the buyer as and seller as. Okay, I hope this isn't too confusing. It can get a little confusing with the dual agency and that, but just remember you need this. Now say they refuse to sign. You cannot put refuse to sign. Okay, you have to fill out a refuse to sign declaration by real estate licensee. Okay, and I'm not going to cover that here, but it'll be a separate paper. So you cannot write refused on this paper. Okay, just keep that in mind. They refuse, you have to fill out a declaration. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.